This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Am I just, am I just flipping it on?
No. Okay, you're running? Okay, we want to welcome our TorahAnytime.com listeners. And also our listeners on Coalition. Okay, we want to welcome our Coalition listeners and our TorahAnytime.com listeners. Rabbi Brog is in the hospital. Rav Victor Miller's Choshev Eidim. We want to learn Refuah Shalema for Shmuel Elchanan ben Yocheved. We should have Refuah Shalema b'Sech Shecher Yisrael. Also for our Coalition and TorahAnytime.com listeners, we are looking now to take power benching to the next step, and that is to make it in a bencher size, so it could be by weddings and dinners and by people's Shabbos tables. We're looking for new dedicators for the power benching bencher size, which will be printed, of course, in the thousands and thousands. If you are interested, please call me at 718-916-3100 or email me at rmmwsi@aol.com. Okay, let's go. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming and joining us for the learning of Torah Hashem. Be'ezras Hashem Yisbach. As always, we begin with Rishus Tamar Asra, Rav Landau, with continued appreciation to all of you for coming and making this shir possible. Tonight's shir is being specially dedicated by a long-time listener, Albert Kahn and family. Le'ilui Mishmas Yisrael Aryeh ben Shmuel HaKoyin. That his neshama should have an aliyah. He should be a melech yosher for his family, for all of us and all of Klal Yisrael. Again, tonight's shir is being dedicated specially by Albert Kahn and family. Le'ilui Nishmas Yisrael Aryeh ben Shmuel HaKoyin, that his neshama should have a great aliyah. We learn with the tefillah that all those that have been touched by the dread of machla, known as yana machla, the related diseases, should have a refuah shalema b'sech shachar Yisrael. All of us and our loved ones should always be healthy. All those that are looking for a shidduch should find a shidduch quickly and easily. All those that are waiting for children should be blessed with zara chaya v'kayama, healthy mommy, healthy baby. All those that are looking for parnasa or better parnasa should find it b'revach v'kavod, and all of us should enjoy lange zisa gezunta shalom bayis. It's a very dramatic parsha, Parshas Vayaishev, with a lot of interesting lessons. We know that in this parsha we find the fascinating dreams of Yosef HaTzadik, and in the Sefer Geirul Gedalyahu he points out a very fascinating diuk that differentiates the two dreams. In the first dream that Yosef had, he relates that Kama Alumasi, we were collecting sheaves, and Kama Alumasi, my sheaf got up, began nitzava and remained standing. V'hinei sisubena alumoseichem, your sheaves surrounded mine, v'tishtachavenu la'alumasi, and bow down to my sheaf, to my pile. So in this first dream, they did not bow down to Yosef. They bowed down to the crops, to the sheaf of straw, of wheat. In the second dream, it says, Hashemesh v'yareach, the sun, the moon, v'achad oser koichavim, and the 11 stars, mishtachavim li, bow down to me. So in the first dream, they didn't bow down to Yosef. They bowed down. Their sheaves bowed down to Yosef's pile. While in the second dream, they actually bow down to Yosef. Now, besides the fact that in the first dream there wasn't a number, because the first dream represents the first time they came down, so it wasn't with Yaakov, it wasn't with Bilhah, and it wasn't with Binyamin. The second dream, the second time, it was Taka, it says, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars, because the second time it was Taka, Yaakov, Bilhah, and the 11 stars. But the Gereg the Dayol points out that the first time they came down, they didn't know it was Yosef. So they didn't bow down to Yosef. They bowed down to the king that had food for them. So essentially they bowed down to Tfuah, because they needed to have crops, because there was a famine. So in the first dream, they don't say that you bow down to me, because you didn't know it was me. It says they bow down to the sheaves, because that's really essentially why they bowed down, because they needed the Tfuah, they needed the crops. The second time they knew it was already Yosef, so there Taka says in the second dream, Mishtachamim li, that you bow down to me. So everything is exact. Now there's a famous remez, famous. You have to, now with computer technology you could probably find this, but they found this before computers. When Yosef had the second dream that the sun and the moon and the 11 stars would bow down, so Yaakov said to him, what are you talking about? Will I and your mother and your brothers bow down to you to the ground? So Rashi explains, you know it's shtuyot, you know it's foolish, because your mother is not alive. Rachel is not alive anymore, so the moon, which would be Rachel, so it's obviously just shtusin. Rashi says, but what he didn't know was the moon represented Bilhah, who raised Yosef after Rachel passed away, and Kol HaMegadol Yosem B'Seich Beisai is Kila Yoldai, and therefore the dream was accurate. So, besides, we've spoken about in previous years, besides the fact that the Torah uses the moon as a metaphor for a wife, which is very fascinating. In a good marriage, the wife is happy to reflect the glow of her husband. That's what the moon is. The moon reflects the glow of the sun. In a good marriage, a wife isn't jealous of her husband's success, is not vying to shine equal to his on the outside. She's very happy to reflect the shine of her husband, which is in itself grounds for an entire shir. A woman's glow, internal glow, is for the home. She's happy that when it comes for the outside, to reflect the glow of her husband. A very far contrast from today, that women don't even want to take the last name of their husbands. Right? But embedded in this pasuk is an amazing thing. The pasuk says, Moach Elohim hazeh asher chalamta. So if you look at the last letter of the word Asher, that's a Reish. Then Chalamta, the first two letters is Ches and Lamed. So that Reish of Asher and the first two letters of Chalamta, Ches, Lamed spells Rachel. Then the remaining two letters of Chalamta is Mem Saf, and the first letter of the next word, Havo, is a Hey. So that's Mem Saf Hey, which spells Mesa. So in the pasuk is embedded what Yaakov said. How can you have dreamed about the moon when Rachel Mesa, when your mother is already dead? So that's embedded in the words. Again, it's hard to visualize it without looking it in the pasuk, but it says, the pasuk says, Asher Chalamta Havo. So Asher, the last letter is Reish. Chalamta, the first two letters is Ches Lamed, so Reish Ches Lamed is Rachel. The latter two letters of Chalamta is Mem Saf, and the first letter of the next word, Havo, Hey, is Mesa. So it says Rachel Mesa in the pasuk. Now, while that in itself is incredible, I also had a thought that if Yaakov's whole point is I could hear that maybe you would become some kind of a monarch and we would bow down to you, but how could your mother bow down to you if she's not alive? But if that's the case, so then why did he say, Havo navo ani ve'imcha ve'achecha? He should have just said, Havo navo imcha. Would your mother bow down to you? Your mother's not alive. Why does he say, Havo navo ani ve'imcha ve'achecha, if that's not what he was incredulous about? So I was thinking that maybe when Yaakov said, Ani, Havo navo ani the imcha v'achecha, he understood that imcha was Bilhah. But because embedded in the beginning of the pasuk was Rachel Mesa, he says that's not going to happen. If your mother was alive and she was still the Akeres Habayis, so then you would have been the top tomato, because you would have been Har B'char. So I could see that perhaps you have reached a stage of monarchy over the family that everybody would bow down to you. But your mother's not alive anymore. So, you're not the head of the family anymore because she's not around. She's not the Akeres Habayis. That could be an explanation to the pasuk and an explanation to what's embedded in the pasuk. And here we have, bearing in mind how Klal Yisrael has been attacked over the centuries about shchita as being inhumane to animals. When it's so much to the contrary, the trouble that PETA has caused for Yidden in the world, when in reality Klal Yisrael is the most sensitive to animals. They're the inventor of animal kindness and animal rights. It's an Orach Chaim HaKadosh. It says that when Yaakov sent the brothers, when Yaakov sent Yosef to find out about the welfare of the brothers, he adds a stanza. Go and see the welfare of your brothers, and check on the welfare of the sheep. Now that's odd. Now if you'll say and check how our business is doing, they were after all shepherds. But he says shloimat tzayin, the welfare of the sheep. So you have to know that there's a very important Orach Chaim HaKadosh. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh writes that it says that Yaakov traveled to a place called Sukkosa, and over there, Vayiven loy bayis, he built himself a house, which, by the way, was unusual for the Shvatim, for the Avos. Most of the Avos lived in tents. Avraham Avinu never lived in a house. Even as wealthy as he was always had a nomadic existence. But there it says Yaakov built himself a house, Vayiven loy bayis, and then the pasuk says ulamikneyu, and for the cattle also sukkahs. And then the pasuk says al kain kara shemamokam sukkahs. You know what this would be like? It would be like saying that the Klosenberger Rebbe went to Eretz Yisrael and built Netanya. And in Netanya, he made stables for the horses. Al Kain Kara Shmoi stables. Shikun stables. It's a Pelodic pasuk. It says, he built himself a house, Ulemikneyu asa sukkais, and then the pasuk finishes off, and therefore Al Kain Kara Shem Amokim Sukkais. He named the place after the booths that he made for the sheep? So Or Chaim HaKadosh says Yaakov over here was establishing for the first time a novelty in the world. To build something to protect the animals from the elements. This was what do you mean? The animals, they live outside. The Rebbeinu Shalom gave them the equipment. What happens if an animal isn't owned? If an animal isn't domestic, he lives outside. The animals don't build themselves houses. So because the animal is owned, you make for it sukkahs. Says the Or Chaim HaKadosh, says the Or Chaim HaKadosh that Yaakov was introducing a novelty into the world. That there's an idea to be sensitive to the welfare of animals. And that was such an important lesson that in order for us to remember the lesson, he named the place after this novelty. He named the place Sukkot. You know, in the Torah, besides the fact that we have a concept, Tzar Baalei Chayim Doraisa, that animal cruelty is prohibited biblically. Biblically. That's why we never, you see a child stamping on ants, you tell them that's not a Jewish thing to do. That's not a Torah thing to do. We're Rachmanim b'nei Rachmanim. We don't stamp on ants. You're taking away a life? What are you doing? You're a mass murderer. Jews don't behave that way. It's from time immemorial, it's considered an act of valor for a Jew to feed the birds. Chaim Pelagi writes that it's a skula for refuahs to feed the birds. Because you go and feed the birds, and the Rebbeinu Shalom tells us that the birds tell the Rebbeinu Shalom in gratitude about your act of kindness. I've told people many times, yeah, it's a beautiful pastime to do with your wife, to go and take the crumbs of Erev Shabbos that were left over, instead of throwing them away, to bring them to the park and feed the birds. In some municipalities, they have a sign up that it's illegal, so you have to know, you have to be careful not to get a summons. But it's a beautiful thing to do, and Chaim Pelagi says it's actually a skula for refuahs. But that's sensitivity to animals. Humans were always sensitive to animals, always, throughout the ages. Talking about sensitivity, one of the things that the Shiftei Kah did to Yosef HaTzadik sounds extremely cruel. It's bizarre that the Shiftei Kah should do such a thing. It's one thing that they lowered Yosef into a pit full of snakes and scorpions. But to lower him in after stripping him naked. You know, lahavdil elef alfei alafim ribei revavas pa'amim. One of the greatest examples of Nazi sadism is the stripping of the Jews naked, men and women, before they went into the guest rooms. Completely stripping them of their human dignity. And here we see that the Shvatim Lahavdil did this to Yosef. Not only did they lower him into a pit full of snakes and scorpions, their own flesh and blood, but before doing that, it says, "Vayafshitu es ketointoi." They took off his tunic, ves ksainis apasim asher olav. The Klei Yoker says that he wore the tunic over the Kseinis Pasim because he didn't want them to be jealous. So he didn't wear it on top. He wore it, his father gave it to him, but he wore it, and then on top of it he wore his tunic so that they shouldn't see it. It shouldn't be staring them in the face. That's why it says, Vayavshito es ketontai, and then Kseinis Pasim asher olav. First they took off the Kseinis, and then the Kseinis Pasim. He didn't wear that on top. He didn't want to make them jealous. The only reason why he said the dreams, people think, what are you saying, the dreams? Why are you igniting envy? He said the dreams because the dreams were nevuah, and a navi is not allowed to be koiveishes nevuasai. He's not allowed to withhold his prophecy. There's an issur for a navi to withhold his prophecy. And indeed, that was the purpose of the dreams, that he should tell it to them, he should inflame their jealousy, and they would sell him down, which would start the ball rolling for the trip down to Mitzrayim, which was the bris bein hamasorim. Yodai say the kigei zarach beretz leilayim. But how do you explain them stripping him of his clothing? Now, of course, we knew that they had to take off the clothing because they would use it as evidence to Yaakov that Yosef was devoured by a wild beast. Right? They showed him the sinus, they dipped it in blood, and they said, Toraf, Yosef, that Yosef was devoured, so they needed it as evidence. But they mamish left him bare and naked. Here he is, he's imploring them, don't leave me like this. So it's interesting what the Mefarshim have to say about this. Many of the Mefarshim say they took off all his clothing that he shouldn't be able to learn. Because when you're libay raya ever, you can't learn. Because they knew that if Yosef would be learning, nothing could happen. And they knew that. You see, Yosef, you have to understand, this wasn't a regular 17-year-old boy. It says, Ki ben zekunim huloi kol ma sheloma b'shem ve'ever mosaloi. Whatever Yaakov learned in Shem ve'ever, he gave to Yosef. Now you have to understand that so stupendous that was. Yaakov learned in Shem ve'ever for 14 years without sleeping. Right? He only slept that night, balaylahu, by the ladder. 14 years he didn't sleep. All that learning that he learned for 14 years without sleeping, he already gave over to Yosef by the time Yosef was 17 years old. Yosef was diligent to the extreme. And if he'd be learning, nothing would be able to happen. You have to know, this is an absolute thing. Just like we have by David HaMelech. In David HaMelech it says that Hashem told him that he would pass away on a Shabbos, so he learned, and when it came his time, the Malach Mavis couldn't get near him because he was learning. There's a similar Gemara, it's a fascinating Gemara. If you want to learn a Gemara with your family, that's so fascinating, open up above a Metzia to Daf Pei Vav Amud Aleph. It's a nice Hanukkah project. Hanukkah is about Torah. It's a nice Hanukkah project to learn with the family. Daf Pei Vav, over there, the Gemara tells us about a great star in Yiddishkeit. One of the great personalities and not that well known, but one of the great personalities of our people throughout the ages was Rabba Bar Nachmani. Now, the Goyim were incited against Rabbi Bar Nachmani. You know why? Because they said for 2 months of the year, he thwarted 12,000 people from the king's service. Because he gave a shear 1 month in the summer and 1 month in the winter that was attended by 12,000 young men. So they accused him of keeping 12,000 people away from the service of the king. Can you imagine that? And imagine, you talk about a big share, now with Kalaloshin and TorahAnytime.com and CDs and tapes. I say it many times. that it's nice to get sponsors for these shiurim because this is the only shiur that loses its subscribers because people listen to me in other ways. I just had today another subscriber, please, my subscribers don't listen to me, you help pay my rent. But I had a subscriber write to me that he's getting too much Torah online, so he's going to cancel my subscription. The venues that give away Rabbanim's Torahs for free, they don't realize that it's not so simple. Not so simple. But the nechama is that the fact of the matter is that still the Rabbanim are still paid by God. So, we'll let God straighten it out. That doesn't free the services. That doesn't free them of their obligation. But the bottom line is it's still paid by God. So anyway, Rabbi Bar Nachmani was pursued by the government, and it tells stories. He ran from one place to another place to another place to another place. They finally caught him. They put him in a tower, and he was mispallel, and the wall of the tower fell down, and he ran away, and he went into a marsh. But in the meantime, there was a machloikis in Shemayim about negoim, about leprosy. The Rabbi Nisham said one way, the Pamalia Shamalia said a different way. So they decided that on earth there was a great expert in the Goyim, Rabbi Bar Nachmani. So they decided to recall him to heaven. They decided to call him up because they wanted his opinion. So they sent down a shliach, the Malach HaMavis, and the Gemara there says the Malach HaMavis couldn't get near him. Because, and I'll tell you the lashon of the Gemara. The Gemara says, "Lo avimotzi hamalach hamavis l'mikrov lei midaloy avakapasik puma begirsa." He didn't stop learning. Learning stops anything bad from happening to a person. That's the great lesson that we learned from Yaakov when he battled the Malach. It was the Malach hamavis that came to get him. Vayarki lo yachaloi. Because Yaakov was the Ish Tom Yaishev Gems. He was always learning. So that's why Yaakov Vino Loi Meis, because he never stopped learning. He never stopped learning. They understood Yosef. They wouldn't be able to, you can't put him in a bar and think that anything's going to happen to him while he's learning. So they undressed him. So he couldn't learn. Now if there would have been water, he could have twirled with his feet the water, and that would have covered and they could continue learning, and therefore it says and Ein Boi Mayim has a double meaning. Ein Boi Mayim means Mayim Ein Boi, and it also means that it's Torah Ein Boi. There was no Torah because Ein Mayim Ela Torah. Shenem Hoi Kol Tzamei L'Chol Mayim. We find the same thing that when Esav plotted to kill Yaakov, he said Yikravu Yemei Evel Avi. Let the days of my father's mourning come. Why? So the simple pshat is, I don't want to kill him and cause my father suffering, but once father dies. But there's another meaning. Yikravu Yemei Evel Avi means that when my father dies, then Yaakov will be in mourning, he'll have to sit shiva, and he won't be able to learn, because Pikudei Hashem Yeshar Mesam Chalev, and then I'll be able to get him. That's the power of Torah. So it's interesting that the Vilna Gaon has an interesting comment here. He says on the pasuk, "Abor reik ein boi mayim." The pit is empty; it has no Torah. But nechoshim and akrovim, snakes and scorpions, he has. He says this is a lesson to all parents. If their children their heads are empty, ein boi mayim, it's not full of Torah, then it gets full of nechoshim and akrovim. It gets full of all kinds of other shtuyot, all kinds of other pollution. That's what it says. that you don't find, the Rambam says, you don't find a machshava varayis of immorality only with a lay that's ponim min ha-Torah, only a heart that's empty from Torah. The mind is like a vacuum. If you fill it with Torah, it doesn't get filled with other stuff. That's why, by the way, when we look for a boy for our daughters that learns Torah, these are the reasons. It's not just because the wife that attaches herself to a husband that learns Torah has the best afterlife. The greatest nitzchias is the nitzchias of Torah. A woman becomes a partner to the husband's Torah. The real investment, the real future, which is the afterlife, hers will be the best. But it's also, like we said, because the best way to keep the Malach HaMavis away from the home is through Torah. But it's more than that. A young man, and I see this so often, if he comes home in the night, goes to work, I'm not talking about just Kailul, he goes to work, he comes home in the night, if he doesn't have a connection to Torah, an interest in Torah, then his mind gets filled with other things. He watches television programs, and therefore he's thinking about other women, not just his wife. He watches things or he reads things, and he has unrealistic fantasies of what marriage is supposed to be like. He has expectations that are unfulfilled. Right? Once he comes home, he goes to a Daf Yomi, he opens up a Chumash and he learns the Parsha. He has a shir in Musar. So then his mind, it's not vacant to be full with shkatzim and ramasim. The Gaon says an interesting thing. The Gaon quotes a Gemara in Bava Basra, which is very hard to understand. It's a Gemara in Bava Basra, Daf Kuf Tezayin Amar Aleph. It says, Kol she'enoi maniach ben liyorshay. Whoever doesn't leave a son to inherit him, HaKadosh Baruch Hu molei alav evra. Hashem is filled with wrath against him. What does that mean? The guy says, is it his fault he didn't have a son? He had 4 daughters. Or they were childless. Is it his fault? Hashem should get angry at him for that? He tried? So the guy says that's not what it means. He has sons. But those sons are not going to send him packages when he dies. Kol she'ena maniach ben liyorshay. Whoever doesn't leave a son that will transmit to the father, when he goes to the next world, those children won't send packages, not going to learn. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mali Alav Evra. Hashem is angry. Evra, by the way, is Gehenim. Ein Evra Ela Gehenim. Shenem Hayoim Evra Hayoim Ahu. They say over Rabbi Elia Lapian and his Rebbetzin lived during World War I. And during World War I there was a terrible famine. And people recalled their children from yeshiva to help them to make some money that they should be able to survive the famine. So Rabbi Elia Lapian and his Rebbetzin had 9 sons in yeshiva. So the neighbors, seeing them struggle, said, bring home 2 or 3 of them. So the Rebbetzin said, I'm saving them for when I really need them. When I get to the Olam HaEmes, they're going to send me packages. That's my investment. You don't fill a child's head with mayim el Torah, then the child's head gets filled with other stuff. And never before was there so much other stuff. Never before was there such an accessibility to a vast array of garbage like there is today. Now, on the subject of Torah, it says, Vayhi kedabra elov yoim yoim, when she spoke to him day after day. The wife of Potiphar tempted Yosef day after day. V'lo shama aleihem. Now, let's be realistic. She was the ultimate temptress. It says she changed clothing several times a day. And she was extremely attractive, extremely seductive. And Yosef was attracted to her. The Medrash says, Russia, it's in our Medrash, the Gemara Yuma Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis. Russia Oimrim Loi, to the wicked person, they would say to him, Mipnei ma lo yasakta b'Torah, why didn't you learn Torah? Amar Noah, you see, I was handsome. I was a playboy. The women fell all over me. They loved me. I was charismatic. I was charming. My pockets were full of money. I had a yacht. I had a Learjet. V'torid b'yitzri. And I was busy with my passion. That's why I didn't learn. The famous Baal Mutzer, Rabbi Itzela Blazes, says, that's what you're going to tell the Rabbeinu Shalom? Not you, Chas B'Shalom. But that's what somebody is going to tell the Rabbeinu Shalom. Rabbeinu Shalom. Rabbeinu Shalom says, why didn't you learn? What do you mean, Rabbeinu Shalom? I was a playboy. I was busy with the women. I had a different gal at every port. That's what you're going to tell the Rabbeinu Shalom when he says, why didn't you learn? He says it's like the mashgiach comes over to a young man and says, why weren't you there by first Seder? He says, well, Rebbe, we were playing poker. That's what you're going to tell the mashgiach? Reb Miller used to stand by the door of Chaim Berlin when he was mashgiach. And at 9 o'clock, tapping his foot, I don't know if he was tapping his foot, came in 5 after 9, you had to give $1. In those days, $1 was a lot of money. Where were you? What are you going to say, Rebbe? We drank last night. Torah B'Yitzri. Rabbi Tzla Blazes said, what's going on over here? He says over a story from the Ben Ish Chai. I'll just tell you the story fast. It's a cute story from the Ben Ish Chai. Somebody comes into his Rav and he says, Erev Yom Kippur, and he says, Rav, I need you to help me to do tshuva. He says, what do you want tshuva? To do tshuva? And he says, I don't wash my achroinu. So he says, no. Is that all? He says, well, I'll tell you the truth, I don't wash my rishonim. He says, you don't wash the Netilas Yadayim? He says, well, I didn't think it was needed when I eat treif. He says, you eat treif? He says, yeah, we go to a restaurant on Shabbos and all the kosher restaurants are closed. So he treif. You know, the situation is getting from bad to worse. So Rabbi Itzla Blazer says, what's going on over here? What kind of a defense is it? Rabbi Shalom says, why aren't you learning? He said, because I'm a playboy. And I was with the women in the casino. What kind of an answer is that? So Rabbi Itzla Blazer gives such an amazing answer. He says, a person in the next world would rather get punished with being with a woman in the casino than for the sin of not learning Torah. That's a worse sin. That's a worse sin. Talmud Torah keneged kulam. Ki lekach no yitzarta. So a person will scrounge around and use he'll say, Rabbeinu Shalom, you gave me a yitzara for women, what can I do? I was with a woman. You'd rather confess to that sin than to go without an excuse of not learning Torah. That's how important it is to learn Torah. The Ben Ish Chai says something so remarkable. He says, why is it that by the Ashkenazim, when they're mispalel for a chayla, they're mispalel with the mother's name? Right? They say, Shmuel Tzvi ben Esther, he had a liver and kidney transplant. He should have a refuah shleima b'ser shachar Yisrael. So you say, Shmuel Tzvi ben Esther, why do you use the mama's name? So Ben Ish Chai gives an amazing answer. He says, because by the mama there's no taina why she didn't learn Torah. So when we're looking for a schus for the chayla, we say the mama's name and not the tata's name, because the tata, there'll always be a taina, why didn't you learn more Torah? So that's what the Ben Ish Chai says. We use the mama's name, because by the mama there's no taina, why didn't you learn Torah? As a matter of fact, when it says Vayaishev Gems Malachtai, there's one shot that Malachtai was Torah. That's what Yosef's Malacha was. Yosef was always doing Torah. That saved him from the wife of Potiphar. Because Barasi Yetzahara, Barasi Torah Tavim. I just want a small nakuda, but it's a big nakuda. For those of you here that are Bechar, from one Bechar to another, for those of my listeners that are firstborns, listen very carefully. I'm not telling you a chidushim, it's a Farish Rashi, but listen carefully. Vayishma Ruvain heard Vayatzileo miyadam, and he saved them. Why did he take the bull by the horns? Why did he take personal achrayas? So Rashi says, Ani Bechar, I'm the firstborn. If something goes wrong over here, Lo Yitla Elabi, they're going to blame me. They're going to blame me. I'm going to take the fall. Rashi is telling us, it's not for naught that a Bechar gets Pishnayim, a double Yerusha. Well, just because he was born first. There's a great responsibility on a firstborn. A firstborn has an achrayus. So, for example, let's say one has elderly parents. And all the children, they're nice children, but everybody's busy. So who makes sure that the elderly parents get a flu shot? Who makes sure that somebody takes care? Everybody's living all over the place, in Muncie and Lawrence. Who makes sure that if it's a very big snow, that the parent can get out to get food or to get their medicine? Or they shouldn't slip down? Who makes sure everybody's busy with their lives? The Bechar has an extra responsibility. Firstborn has an extra responsibility. It's not, well, we're all children, what's the difference? No. Lo Yitla Sirchan Elabi. Reuben says the Bechar has a big responsibility. A Bechar has to know that. A Bechar, by the way, also is a trendsetter. As the children grow up, the firstborn, if he lives his life correctly, is a trendsetter. I look at my life. I went to the yeshiva of Staten Island and learned, and all three of my brothers followed suit. If I would have done something else, I was a trendsetter. That's also a responsibility of a Bechar, to be a trendsetter. Now, it wasn't only Ruvain, but also Yehuda. Yehuda, after all, was the Melech. Yosef Shevet me Yehuda. It says, Vayered Yehuda me'esechav. Yehuda took a plunge. He took a plunge. Rashi says they took him down from his Gedula because they said that he should have stopped them. But the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel says, what happened? What was the plunge that Yehuda took? It says, V'nochas Yehuda min achasim. He lost his wealth. Yehuda was a very rich man, and after the debacle with Yosef, he became impoverished. And Rashi says that the two things, the Mefarshim say the two things, that Rashi and the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel go hand in hand. That he went down from Gedula because he lost his money. Because the Welt says, "Vi is do the mayor is do the day." Right? So he went down from his Gedula when he lost his money. But why did he lose his money? He lost his money because people that have money find themselves in a position to stop wrong behavior. And if they don't use it in that way, then the Rebbeinu Shalom sometimes takes away their money. And that's a Gemara. The Gemara says, the Farish Gemara, B'shvil daled dvarim nichsei balabatim nimtziru l'malchus. For 4 sins, the wealthy landowners have their assets seized by the government, and they become impoverished. Well, what was the one of the 4? One of the 4 is al shahaya sipek biyodam limchais v'loy macha. because they should have rebuked, they should have protested, and they didn't protest. Here you have a wealthy man. He sits on the board of directors of a school. And there's an avla being done in the school. They're throwing out children from the classroom. Embarrassing children, staining them for life. And he could have said something, but he didn't. He doesn't say, because maybe then the yeshiva will ask him for more money. He doesn't say anything. He could lose his money. Now I'm going to leap. Once we're talking about this, I'm going to leap to the subject of Tamar. Tamar teaches us a great lesson. He mutzeis, she was taken out. Shilcha el chameha, she sent to her father-in-law. Leimar leish asher eila loy. He said, take her out to be burnt. She's a harlot, a baskoye. So she didn't want to say, I'm pregnant from you. So she wasn't going to embarrass him. She said, if he wouldn't confess, then she was ready to go and die together with her 2 unborn babies. And from there we learned a great Jewish concept. It's easier for a person. Every year I say this. Can't say it enough times. It doesn't say chayiv adam. It doesn't say mitzvah la'adam. It says it should be easier for a person. If you ever go to the matzah bakery and look at the heat of the oven, it should be easier for a person to go into the matzah oven than to embarrass someone in public. Now that takes training. It takes training that it should be so impossible for us to embarrass another person that would be easier for us to go into the matzah. That takes a lot of training. But that's the very building blocks of a Jew. The very first word in the Torah, Vayaishev, is Yorei Boshes, to be afraid to embarrass somebody. That's the building blocks of Yiddishkeit. Embarrassment is the worst thing. You're always praying, like Nevaish, like Nikalein. You're always praying that. Lo Yevaish, but embarrassment is a terrible thing. But it's such an amazing, if you think about the language, Noyach Loila Adam, it should be easier. For Tamar, it was easier to be burnt than to embarrass Yud. It was easier for her. It's a big madrega, but we have to teach. If we have children embarrassing friends in the schoolyard, we have to tell them out. So I want to tell you one story. There's a sefer, Kishmoy Kain Hu. There's a sefer. It's an interesting name. There's a sefer called Pilei Ployim. You can imagine what a special sefer it is. It's called Pilei Ployim, Wonder of Wonders. In the sefer, this sefer has all kinds of things. So in the sefer, there's a ma'aser that I don't know personally. This Rebbe, I never even heard of this Hasidus or this town, but there's an Admir Reb Moshe Tzvi Misavron. Never even heard of it. But Reb Moshe Tzvi Misavron. So he was a great Rebbe. And they brought to him a woman that was seized by a dibuk. We heard years ago, there was a time that people were plagued by a dibuk. And another voice came out of them, talked to them, revealed other people's secrets. So this woman, a dibuk seized her. So this great Rebbe, Reb Moshe Tzvi, I told you the name of the sefer is Pilei Ployim. So this Rebbe, Reb Moshe Tzvi Misavron, knew how to exercise a dibuk. So Reb Moshe Tzvi Misavron communicated with the voice in this woman's body, and the wretched neshama told Reb Moshe Tzvi that he was a sinner, but later on in life he became a Baal Tshuva, and he did tshuva on all his sins. But shortly before he died, the following Maisa happened. He said he knew Tillim very well. And he came in, and there was a young Avreich, a young Talmid Chacham, saying Tillim next to his Shver. And he came to Perek Pei, Kapitel Pei Tes, Pasuk Lamed Ches, and there the Pasuk says, it says, Ki Yareach Yikain Olam, Ve'eid B'shachak Nemon Sel. So instead of reading it, Ve'eid B'shachak, he read it, Ki Yareach Yikam Olam Void. So instead of ending Yikain Olam and then Ve'eid B'shachak Nemon Sel, he said, Ki Yareach Yikain Olam Void. Maybe his Tillim didn't have Nakudas, I don't know. So this person who was in the girl, the Dibuk, says, I started laughing and said, this is the person you call a Ben Torah? He doesn't even know how to pronounce a pasuk in Tillim. And I walked away, not realizing how I mortified this young man in front of his shver. Because of this, they did not let me into Olam Haba, even though I did tshuva on all my sins. I was forced to wander around the world until I was allowed to enter into this girl's body for a tikkun. That's what happens if a person is malbim pnei chaveru b'rabim. Ein lo chilek l'olam haba. Therefore, we have to know. You see, sometimes people screaming at their wives in public. You realize what you're doing to a wife when you scream at her husband, screams at her wife in public. He's embarrassing her publicly. This is a behavior that is mamish, absolutely never acceptable. It's interesting. It says, Barei came by Mayim, Avon Nechashim Akravim Yesh Bay. So, I mean, Reuven was makbid, it shouldn't have water, but it has snakes and scorpions. I mean, it seems to me he's gotten his priorities wrong. So Rabbi Yonasan Akshit says an interesting thing. The Shvatim were always afraid of water. Remember, the stars said that Klal Yisrael is going to fall because of water. They were always afraid of water. That's why Paro used against them water, tried to drown them in the water. Right. Bottom line is that's also why Rabbi Yonasan Akshit says that when they got to the Yam Suf, nobody wanted to jump in. Until Nachshon jumped in. They were afraid of water. They said, maybe that's the water. And the water ended up being the Mei Mariva. But that's why Reuven made sure there was no water in the bar. I want to share with you some Sefer now, which is remarkable. He came to do his work. Now, we just learned in the Daf Yomi not long ago that there's one shot. He came into the house, La'asais Malachtai, La'asais Srochav. He said, this is the day we're going to have a good time. He decided that he can't take it anymore. He has to consummate his passion. So that was the day that everybody went to church. So, Vayova, Boisa, La'asais Malachtai. This is going to be the day. Says the Chassam Sofer. Far be it from Yosef to have such a type. Yosef was always learning. He learned all his life. He was the worthy son of Yaakov and Rachel, Tzadikei Elyon. Where does it come? Says the Chassam Sofer. Nichnes aloi taiva. The taiva entered into him. The malach ha-taiva entered into him so that later he would understand why the Shvatim sold him and have mercy on him. After seeing that he could succumb to a taiva, he'll more be able to understand how the Shvatim could have tried to sell him into perpetual slavery and maybe even attempt to kill him because of jealousy. He had to experience uncontrollable taiva in order later to be able to judge the shvatim more favorably. So the Chassam Sofer says. Now, in this is a tremendous lesson. We're taught heavy dones ha'adam kol ha'adam l'kafskos. We're taught al todenes chaver chad shetegia lemekayim. There are people that when somebody comes to shul and he's acting funny, they're right away so critical. They don't realize this person, when he left the house, his wife was yelling at him. He comes home, the table is not set. She's not interested to eat with him. When he comes to shul, he's so frustrated. He has nothing to live for. People don't understand. They're not done. A person has to be very careful, because if you're not done a person l'kafskos, then the Rebbeinu Shalom sometimes has to give you an experience le'aleinu that you should learn. Oh, now I understand. You don't want that to happen. Here's a person, a family, they have a child, a wayward son, their whole life is topsy-turvy. The son is dating a shiksa, he's on drugs, and they can't think straight. People don't understand why he's not acting normal. Here's another person, just lost his job. It was the third job, and lost the third job. He's crazy. You understand? Why is he behaving like a maniac? Judge people favorably. You don't want the Rebbeinu Shalom to give you an experience, to give us an experience, in order that we should understand. Now, of course, this reason that some Seifers gives is besides two reasons that Rashi gives why it happened. Again, the fact that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave such an nisyayin to Yosef was for a reason. Otherwise, the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't give uncontrollable nisyayin. Rashi says in Vayishlach, it's because he was choshed the shvatim on Arayas. One of the things that he told Yaakov, one of the things that he was choshed them for, it says they were chashunim al Arayas. The Mefarshim say that some of the shvatim married a mother and a daughter, because since they were Megaya them, they weren't related, and it was before Matan Torah. But he held they weren't allowed to marry a mother and a daughter. So they were chashudim al Arayas. So therefore, since he suspected them for Arayas, so therefore he was tempted by Arayas, which is also a scary thing. If we speak Lashon Hara about somebody, sometimes Hashem will give us that as a temptation. That's such a frightening thing. Here's a person, he doesn't understand. All his life he wasn't talking in shul. All of a sudden now he has a temptation to talk in shul. Where did that come from? Because he was talking to Lashon Hara about people that were talking in shul. It's such a scary Rashi. Here, he never had his wife not nice to him. First episode, all of a sudden his wife is not nice to him because he said, did you see how that woman behaved to her husband? This Rashi is telling us something very frightening. Don't talk about other people that could boomerang back at you. What you talked about. Then Rashi says something else in this week's parasha, even scarier, or at least just as scary. Rashi says that Yosef was mesalsel b'sarai. He was, when in the house of Potiphar, they gave him full reign. Everything that he does was matzliach, so he became a top tomato in the house. So he started eating and drinking, and he was mesalsel b'sarai. So Rashi says, your father is sitting at home and mourning you, and you're having a good time? You're eating croissants? You're having creme brulee? You're dandifying yourself in the window while your father is suffering? I'm going to incite against you to die. Beer, she was called a beer because a beer has no shame. She came after him with no shame. She exposed herself, no shame. And no shame. This is also a frightening thing. Your parents are going through a tough time. Maybe they're not making it economically. Maybe they're suffering with the pains of old age. And you go on your life like nothing is happening. A person has to be acutely aware of the situation of their parents. It's not an easy thing. Also, something that's not in front of us we don't think about. But here Hashem said, Yosef, your father is suffering, and this is the way you're behaving? The next word from the Chidah is something a concept that we've spoken about here time and time again. It says, "Vaki kedabra el Yosef yom yom." She spoke to him every day. Sleep with me, even lie next to me. Even if you don't sleep with me, lie next to me. So, first of all, we know that she was mechavan l'shem shemayim because she saw that from her family would come children from Yosef. She didn't know that it was from her adopted daughter Osnas. But it was clear afterwards that she was not mechavan l'shem shemayim. Why? Because when Yosef finally spurned her, later on she slandered him. And the fact that he languished in jail for 12 years, she did nothing to stop it. So obviously she wasn't l'shem shemayim. Contrast that to Tamar, that afterwards she was ready to die, even with Yehuda's 2 children, rather than embarrass Yehuda. So in retrospect, we know that she wasn't l'shem shemayim. But says the Chidah, we know that she wasn't l'shem shemayim even before. Why? Because she had to sell herself too much. Vehi kedabra elav yom yom. The Yetzer Tov doesn't have to sell himself, and he doesn't sell himself over and over again. If it was l'shem shemayim, it wouldn't have to be repeated over and over and over again. That's the Atzas Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is the one that's compared to a zvuv. No matter how many times we push away the fly, it keeps on coming back. So I told you from Rav Twersky, it says, "Vayar Elokim as kol asher asa v'hinei tov ma'oi tov zu Yetzer Tov ma'oi zu Yetzer Hara." So Rav Twersky says, if something is too much, that's a sign it's the Yetzer Hara. Nobody pushed you 1,000,000 times to come to the shir tonight. Nobody pushed you 1,000,000 times. You came, okay, but if you wouldn't come, people push you 1,000,000 times to do something. If there's a machloikis, you have a voice pushing you. Get involved, get involved, get involved, get involved. Anytime I want to do something too much, they say over, Rabbi Wein says this, any two, T-O-O, is no good. Any two, T-O-O, is no good. That's what Shmuel said. Shmuel's mother, Chana, said, give me somebody that's not too smart. Not two. I don't want two. T-O-O is not good. If it's too many times, it's not good. Now, unfortunately, I didn't leave enough time. This was supposed to be the major point of the shir. I didn't leave enough time. But we'll see how fast we could do it. By the way, in case anybody wonders, there will be a shir next week. We always have a shir on Hanukkah, special shir, the covered Hanukkah. I'm not sure if it'll be on the Parsha of Hanukkah. I didn't decide yet. But there will be a shir next week. So come. You want to be moisef your Torah on Hanukkah, not be mamayit your Torah. We'll have the Hanukkah menorah here. Says Vayimtza'eyu Hish, when Yaakov sent Yosef, so he was looking for the brothers. Vayimtza'eyu Hish, a man found him. Being a so'eh besada, he was wandering in the field. Vayishaleyu Ish Lemar, and this man asked him, Matavakish, what are you looking for? What are you seeking? So Rabbi Frand in his newest Sefer on Chumash brings down from the Kotzker Rebbe the following verse. It's a fundamental life's verse. The Kotzker Rebbe says that this pasuk is to be homiletically understood to refer. This pasuk is to be homiletically understood to refer to mankind in general. The pasuk says, "Vayimtza'eyu ish." The ish is Gabriel. The Medrash says, "Is the angel Gabriel." Gabriel finds mankind. V'hinei toeh basada. And mankind in general, so many people are straying. They're wandering here and there. They don't know They don't know what to do with their lives. They don't know how to be fulfilled. They don't know what to do. They're floundering. People have middle-age crises. They don't know how to be happy. They don't know what to do with their time. Says the Kutchker Rebbe, Vayishaleu ish leimar. And Gabriel asked, Ma tevakesh? What are you seeking? What's your focus? What's your aim? That's the key. That a person in life needs to be focused. Rabbi Frank quotes from Rabbi Luban, from Edison, from Highland Park. He said, Rabbi Luban gives a great mashal. He says this, today we have many medical advances and many technological and also weapon advantages because of laser technology. So what's laser? It's a beam of light. But the beam of light, they have learned how to make it so focused that it can do amazing things. He says that's the benefit of being focused. When we're focused, we can do amazing things. I once told you that I gave a shir by a Super Bowl party. It was an unusual shir I was asked to give by halftime. So I stopped in and I said they shut the apparatus, and I said, what can we learn from football? That you cannot have a touchdown, you cannot win unless you have a goal. You play hockey, you can't score without a goal. You can't win baseball without home plate. You have to have goals. You have to be focused. Otherwise, you drift through life aimlessly. The Kutchker Rebbe says the question is, Ma tevakesh? What do you seek? I'll add that Yosef is always a symbol of Klal Yisrael. That's why the Tanchuma says Yosef is Begemat Yitzion. What's your goal? So I said to myself, let's look at the psukim in the Torah that use the word bakesh. And I was amazed. Bakesh shalom v'rodfeyu. Seek peace and pursue it. Oh, that's a focus. A person in his home, if he has the focus, her home, I need to be focused on peace. Because if ain't shalom, ain't klum. There has to be peace. I have to learn the buttons not to push, the things to do to always make peace. That's a focus. That's a goal. That's a goal for the home. That's what the Rambam says. That should be one of the major focuses of life. That's why it says, that's a focus. That's a goal. Anytime you preserved peace, you anticipated a problem and sidestepped it, then you're focused on your goal. There's another goal. Achashalti meis Hashem also avakesh. Shiftei beveis Hashem kol yemei chayai. Lachazois b'nayim Hashem. Oh, the goal of learning Torah. That's a goal. Kilakach noitzorta. You're focused on that goal. I want to finish Shas. I want to learn Chumash and Rashi. I want to finally learn Navi. I want to learn Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. That goal brings such sipuk. Then you're not wandering. You're not aimless. You have a goal. Then there's another pasuk. I was thinking about the pasuk. Dirshu Hashem v'uzoi bakshu panav tamid. That's another bakshu. Dirshu Hashem v'uzoi bakshu panav tamid. The goal of living with Hashem. B'chol drachecha da'eyu, in all your ways. Today in the Daf Yomi. Not today. Yesterday in the Daf Yomi. Put on the right shoe, put on the left shoe, tie the left shoe, tie the right shoe. Even in the way we dress. Wash the right side, wash the left side. If you're washing your head, wash the head first. It's the Melech of the Eivarim. How we wash, how we dress, how we talk, how we look. It's all Hashem. That's also a focus. Shivisi Hashem Lenegdi Summit. That's being focused. Matavakesh. Bakshu Ponav Tomid. Once again, I want to mention that today's shir was dedicated by Albert Kahn and family, in loving memory of Yisrael Aryeh ben Shmuel HaKohen. His neshama should have an aliyah, he should be a Meltz Yosef for his family. I want to remind you that we are looking actively now to print the power benching in a bencher size. We're looking for people to dedicate. If you are interested, please call me at 718-916-3100 or email me at rmmwsi@aol.com. We have here tonight a shir from the Classics Vault called Studying Our Gedolim, Maises from Gedolim Yisrael. That CD is available. Tonight's CD will be available shortly. We will daven Ma'ariv here in 5 minutes at 11:15. Be'ezus Hashem. Thank you for coming. Reb Chananya ben Akash Amar. Ratzah Kadosh Baruch Hu l'zakoyses Yisrael lefikach hirbel am Torah mitzvah shenam adinoi chafetz l'man tzidka yagdul Torah v'yadir.
Here's from last week, 5 for this week. The other 20 I gave for Tuesday.
I know. You should give me good news. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mivarach L'Olam L'Olmei Olmaya.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.